are ready to go live to the broadcast in 5, 4, 3, 2. We are live with the broadcast.
No. That's always right there.
A lot of people coming in. Really good.
Jacques Marcos. Alan Levy. David Langer. He's got the fire behind him now.
Very cool.
Hi, can you hear me, Iggy?
Yes, we can.
Okay, we can stop the music.
1 second. Music stopped.
Excellent. Well, hi, everybody. This is really a very special session for today. And welcome. It happens to be the third Thursday of the month, which is when we do the monthly University of Miami Cerebrovascular Skull-Based Surgery Symposium. But today is very special. Today, March 17, 2022, is really the 42nd time we do this. But why is it special? Because we have three directors today for a very special session. Myself, Jacques Marcos from the University of Miami, Bernard Bendock, the chair of neurosurgery at Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale, and Fadi Charbel, the chair of neurosurgery at UIC in Chicago. And you'll understand as the session progresses why these two individuals, who are my wonderful friends, are with us today. Why are we here today? Well, we're here today because two neurosurgical colleagues and friends encountered adversity, namely a spinal cord injury, and have many messages to share with the rest of us. Because we want to know, as neurosurgeons, what are the unique thoughts and feelings, perhaps, that are experienced when you become a neurosurgical patient. Because we want to learn more about the neurosurgical rehabilitation and psychological dimensions of spinal cord injury. Because we want to know if there are lessons in adversity and if there is sunshine after a storm. But really, mostly, because we are dear friends and colleagues of those two special guys, and we collectively, and I'm sure you who are joining us today, and perhaps are unable to say it, you wish to express to them in the most sincere way that we actually care for them. What we are not here to do, we are not here to pry into the privacy of two individuals that they will only share with us what they want to share with us. We are not going to engage in voyeurism or a sort of public neurosurgical and psychoanalytical examination of two physicians who have volunteered to share their time and private thoughts. It's up to them to share what they wish to share. We are not here to feel sorrow without hope or pity without empathy. So really the themes today, yes, they are about physical and emotional ordeals. They are about daily struggles. They are about rehabilitations. They're about neurosurgery for spinal cord injury. They're about psychology of spinal cord injury. But the most positive aspect of all this, of course, it's about resilience. So I just, I'm used to doing, talks about kind of pure neurosurgical things. I want to put us a little bit in the mood for this important session. So I want to just refresh our own memory of what resilience really is. I mean, I love the poem If. I had it as a teenager next to on the wall of my bedroom, and you all know the poem. And if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. I've always loved Invictus by Henley, and who can forget the last paragraph? It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. So hopefully those messages will trickle through as our fireside conversation will proceed. We are neurosurgeons. Some of us here are neurosurgeons on this panel. We have seen resilience in our patients. A personal story I can tell you is the most resilient patient I've seen was when I was a medical student. He was an African-American US Marine injured in 1983 in Beirut. And here I was, the nervous medical student. He clearly saw me trembling, not knowing how to handle his injuries. Instead of me telling him, don't worry, you will be fine, he tells me, don't worry, doc, you will be fine. If that is resilience, I don't know what is, and I talked about those things in an article and other things. There is, of course, resilience in neurosurgeons. I mean, Hunt and David and others will remember the story of Thor Sant, the spectacular cerebrovascular neurosurgeon who the last few years of his life kept operating in agony from multiple myeloma. He had special braces. The people at Mayo will tell you stories. Fred Meyer will tell you stories that will make you, to this day, weep from the resilience of this remarkable guy who, of course, was a company commander, awards in the military. Just his story of resilience was featured in 60 Minutes back in the 90s, and it's probably one of their most popular episode. I and others here have lost 3 very good friends, neurosurgeons who happen to be giants of neurosurgery just this last year, and we've seen them live through true resilience. Evandro de Oliveira, who lived with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis for the last easily 3.5 years and died from it last February. And Bernard Georges died after many years of really bad lung cancer, living with one lung, operating, keeping a smile at all times. And last but not least, Fred Gentili, who died recently, January 15, from a glioblastoma multiforme. He lived with it, or since the diagnosis, for 7 months. And those of us who are very close friends of Fred saw what resilience is. And resilience is interesting, you know, physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, supposedly, and I hope the psychologist will teach us a little more during the session, if that's true, supposedly that there are 6 core competencies of resilience: self-awareness, self-regulation, optimism, mental agility, character, and connection. You know, in medicine, you know, we talk about burnout and how our residents are getting burnt out and so forth. But I want to show you that by now, classic slide of burnout versus work-life balance. And look where neurosurgery lives. And among all the surgical disciplines, we are down here. We're supposed to be right here. We're supposed to burn out at a much higher rate than we do. So no wonder neurosurgery is the queen of the surgical disciplines. Not to mention queens are a lot more resilient than kings for sure. But we certainly deserve our place in the sun as a specialty, as the kind of special people this specialty attracts. But resilience isn't grit. And one of the things I'd love to get out of our guests today is, have they developed grit, or are they in the resilient phase of their recovery? I'm not going to read all this slide to you, but resilience is really bouncing back and grit is bouncing forward. And you can read kind of the other comparisons between resilience and grit. And if you haven't read Angela Duckworth's book on grit, it's excellent. And of course, she talks about passion and perseverance, and you can break down grit into guts, resilience, intensity, and tenacity. And as if we don't have enough Lebanese origin on this panel between Fadi, Bernard, and myself, here is a fourth one, Nassim Taleb, who has published The Black Swan, Skin in the Game, and introduced the concept of anti-fragility, meaning anti-fragility is even more powerful than resilience. The non-resilient will die, the resilient will survive, but the anti-fragile actually will thrive on adversity. And you can see it here in a bit of a graphic form. And it's like thinking of the multi-headed monster. You chop off one head and they grow a new one. So as he says in his book, you really want to be the fire and not the candle and wish for the wind. You want to invite adversity if you have anti-fragility to grow. So today, I think we're going to see if our guests are candles or fires. And I'm going to hand it over to Bernard to introduce the first special guest, Han Batjer, who you can see here in younger years in 1984. Bernard, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jacques. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'd like to thank Jacques for organizing this amazing session, and I'll pick up on a thread that Jacques introduced or mentioned, that's connection. You know, part of academic life, one thing I've been thinking about a lot about lately is the idea of family and community. And to get through a field like neurosurgery does require building a community around you of mentors and mentees. And when a mentor or a mentee or a colleague in the field, and sometimes a mentor can, like let's say David Langer can be both a mentor and a friend. There is an overlap between feelings of family and just collegiality that can come on. So when I heard about David, for example, it's much like hearing as if a family member had an injury. And when I first heard about Dr. Batjer being injured, it is as if I'd heard an uncle or a father got injured. So we are privileged to live in these communities that are probably contribute 90% of our success, to be honest. And so in that spirit, I'm going to give a very brief introduction of Dr. Batjer. I only have a couple minutes on our agenda, so this introduction will not do it justice. But and I had a previous opportunity to introduce him, and it's very interesting. I like to study CVs and how people develop their careers. And as much as I knew Hunt, I went back and looked at his career from a very early age to his early, middle, and later career. And really, there were three phases, just for our audience who are just getting to know him. I hope you've had a chance to read the bio. His first phase was at University of at UT Southwestern with Duke Sampson as his mentor. Then we had the fortune of having him come to Northwestern, where I was a medical student and was fortunate enough to match there under his tutelage, where he had a golden era of Northwestern neurosurgery between 1995 and 2012. And then he went back home to be the chair at UT Southwestern after Duke Sampson retired between 95 and 2020. And really has had an amazing career. Jacques, if I could have the next slide. Here, this is just a biopsy of some of his achievements. 470 peer-reviewed papers and book chapters, 53 endowed lectureships, 64 visiting professorships, 43 executive and board appointments, 9 books, over 100 committee positions, chair of ABNS and RRC, 2 of the most important bodies in our field, president of nearly every neurosurgical society in North America, emeritus professor at UT Southwestern, and soon to be an adjunct professor at Mayo Clinic. In addition to all that, he currently serves on the board of the ACGME, kind of fits with his passion for education, and currently serves as this important body's treasurer. One of the things I've been thinking a lot about lately, I recently saw an episode of an interview of a Supreme Court justice, and giving a tour of his magnificent office. And where he spent most of the interview is the wall that had a picture of all his clerks, the clerks who mentor at the Supreme Court. And it got me thinking that a lot of times in neurosurgery, we think about, people get awards for their achievements and so on. But there aren't enough awards for how many mentees you have influenced. We talk about it, but I think it's something we should emphasize more. So I want to end perhaps with Dr. Batjer's most impactful influence, and that is the long list of mentees that he has played a role in, in their careers. And these are individuals who have gone on to become leaders in academic neurosurgery and in the private world. And they do have one thing in common, a deep passion for their mentor, Dr. Batjer, and a deep sense of gratitude for their mentor, Dr. Hunt Batjer. So I share that in that circle of gratitude, that sense of community. And so I'm very honored and privileged to be here today. And thank you again, Jacques, for the opportunity.
Thanks, Bernard. And now I'm going to invite Fadi Charbel to introduce David Langer. Are you muted, Fadi?
Yeah, I just unmuted. Thank you, Jacques, for putting this together. And I think it's going to be a session that will evoke a lot of feelings for all of us, because we have two outstanding individuals that have impacted, I think, not just about everyone that we can think of, certainly have impacted us and impacted me. Bernard introduced Hunt, who, while not directly someone that I interacted with on a day-to-day basis, is certainly the person that I looked up to whom I reached for counsel on many occasions, and who's always been an amazing gentleman and a resource to all of us. My privilege today is to say a few words on behalf of David Langer. And I will start with the most direct professional way of introducing Dr. Langer, who is currently the chair of neurosurgery at Lenox Hill and a vice president for this Northwell Health System, which is a huge system. He's a professor of neurosurgery at that school. David is known worldwide for his primary interest in vascular neurosurgery, bypass, innovation. Many of you know that he's a third-generation physician. The impact his dad has had on him is important, and perhaps that will come in the discussion of what Jacques, you alluded to as what makes us who we are. He has been at the forefront of innovation. He's been supportive of things many of us have done. He's developed the playback health system, which is an incredible new generation type of communication and sharing of knowledge between all tiers of healthcare. And he's someone who's done things that very few people would have been able to do. When he became chair at Lenox Hill, a sleeper hospital in neurosurgery, moved it very quickly, in I would say less than 10 years, into being ranked worldwide number 23, I think, right now. He's the best doctor, best, et cetera. He's on all sorts of boards. And he's really so young at heart that he has jumped into this new wave of communication. He instituted the Brain Turns program. I think there's over 15,000 students that have been engaged in that. So incredible professional arc so far. And I would venture to say it's nowhere near being its peak. But if I go to the next slide, and I think in that you would recognize 3 slides here where David Langer is portrayed that indicate first and utmost one thing, that he's someone who reinvents himself. we hear the term Renaissance man. David Langer, already a well-established leader of neurosurgery, decides to go and undergo a endovascular training. Not a lot of people did that. Some have. David Langer espouses high-end technology, the exoscope and other new modalities. We're not here to say what they do, only to say that he is at the forefront of early adoption and innovation. And then I think those of you that have seen the Netflix series Lenox Hill have seen the heart of David Langer, the true man, the family man, the physician, and the one who felt for his patients. And you've seen these episodes. David loves to ski, and I think that leads us to where we are today. If I can have the next slide. And David has been, here you can see Jacques, David, and I, and Nan in the other picture, out on the slopes. Can't keep up with him. I certainly can't. Phenomenal skier. So certainly this is not related to what happened to his lack of abilities. And I will go to the next slide to say that to me, personally, David Langer is a brother. His family is my family. His kids are like my kids. And he's a friend like no other. And we look forward to many more times together with you and Nan and everyone else. And in this last slide, this slide was sent to me by and others by Nan when he was there. And she somehow prophetically said, I'm sure you'll find a way to factor that in a talk someday. And here it is, Nan, if you're watching, and Dave. And what does this slide show? I mean, look at him. He's in the hospital. He's nowhere near beginning to recover from a massive injury. He's just going like at 5,000 miles a second. He's got the phone. He's got the compression boots. He's got the collar. But Jesus Christ, he's got the what's the name of that guy in Breaking Bad hairstyle? Yeah, he's just indomitable. So if that doesn't sum up David Langer, nothing will. So it's a treat being here with you and a privilege to introduce you, David.
Thanks, Fadi. So this is the right time now to introduce our panelist, who again, I'm delighted they're with us. Number one here on the left is my partner of 24 years now, Alan Levy, professor and chair of the Department of Neurosurgery. And of course, an internationally renowned spine and peripheral nerve expert. And I'm delighted, since I know nothing about spine, that he is here to field in any questions or any comments he may have about the neurosurgical aspects of what our guests have gone through. Next is Kevin Dalal, Associate Professor of Rehabilitation Medicine, again at University of Miami, and Director of the Spinal Cord Injury Unit there, again to address those issues. And last but not least, Rosie Curiel, whose today is her 10th wedding anniversary. So she may disappear in about an hour and leave us. And I'm already so grateful that she actually is sharing this time with us. And she is an associate professor of neuropsychology, and of course will address those aspects. Now, not on the flyer, because this was a last minute edition of yesterday. By the way, myself and Bernard and Fadi are zooming to you from Bogota, Colombia. We are at this Congress, and I come across Maria Tatajiba, who I knew from before. Certainly, she is a psychologist. She's the wife of Marcos Tatajiba, the chair of neurosurgery in Tübingen, and she is a psycho-oncologist and volunteered to join our panel. And she will tell you herself in a second what is the other reason that she is with us, and it has to do with the paper she's written on the topic. But I think I'm gonna stop sharing my slides now, and So we can now start the real chatting.
Would you like me to go there?
If you give me a second. So I'd like the panelists, perhaps Alan first. Alan, would you please just tell us a little bit, a brief, I mean, I've already introduced you, but tell us some more about your practice, what, and your intersection with spinal cord injury. And then I'll ask Kevin, and then I'll ask our two psychologists a brief introduction of the relationship to the topic.
Jacques, thanks for putting this together. It's really an honor to be together with 9 colleagues who are leaders in their field, but particularly David and Hunt for participating in this. And I'll be very brief. I've been doing neurosurgery for 25 years, but I have a special interest in spinal cord injury and in the research of spinal cord injury, including developing new therapies. So thanks for including me.
Thanks, Alan. Kevin.
Hi, good evening. Thank you guys so much for the invitation. I'm flattered and humbled to share this time and space with you. And unexpectedly and particularly moved by the spirit of fraternity and closeness that I see shared here. I think that's something that I think most departments could learn a bit from, and a lot of heart went into a lot of these introductions, and I find that to be very reassuring. So I'm a spinal cord injury director here. I'm also the inpatient medical director at our new institution here, which we have to thank a lot of people, many of whom are directly in the neurosurgery field, for helping to get that financed and off the ground. And I think we're doing great things at a very fast pace, and I'm sure our patients are benefiting. My one, if you'll indulge me just a minute, intersection with the idea of grit and perseverance and resilience is actually the one that most got me interested in this part of the field. And though it may not be the surgical part of the field or the care spectrum of care, I think it's one that is relatable. When I met my now wife in college at Duke, she came to find out had a father who was suffering from ALS. He was actually diagnosed the day her brother was born. He was pacing in the waiting room and was finding that he could not plantar flex in the normal fashion. And this is back before they let men into the delivery room, and pacing back and forth. And they worked him up and admitted him and diagnosed him with ALS. And this is a man that was a 3-sport athlete in high school and University of Florida. And he had a particularly slow course, unusually slow course for ALS, and the progression or regression from fully ambulatory to cane to walker to wheelchair was unusually protracted. So from 1980 to 1993, that was the span of time until the point where he became vent dependent. So the decision to trach him and to continue on in a power chair as a vented patient, functionally quadriplegic, was obviously a dramatic decision. I was not anywhere on the map of this family at that time. But a few years later is when I came to encounter him, and when his daughter and I were seeing each other, and I came down to Tampa and I wanted to meet him. And I was a little intimidated. I was a little scared. I'm at this point a undergrad, hoping to go to medical school and trying to figure out my interests. And this was a lot to take in. He's in his house, but he's in a hospital bed, and he's got a ventilator attached to him. And I didn't know what to expect. I had not been exposed to a lot of that. I had just done the usual internships and shadowing and all those things that undergrads do. And the thing that I was most struck by, not to overuse this term resilience, was his complete fear and avoidance of obsolescence, what he perceived as obsolescence. So when he saw, and he could sort of see read the tea leaves of what was imminent and what was coming, and he wasn't really sure at what pace it would come, and it is an unusual variant. He went back to school and got a doctorate and knew that as a state university professor, he would have access to much better insurance. And he was at that time hitherto an advertising executive that had to travel a lot and do those kinds of things, which he knew was going to be impossible. So he went back and became a teacher. And at the point after which I met him, he was like I said, a ventilated patient, tetraplegic, and he was teaching classes 3 days a week at the University of South Florida in the exact condition he was in, not able to move a muscle save for his larynx and his eyes, and he was able to speak, but it was labored with the trach in place. And he only wanted to talk to me about the book he was writing, and by writing I mean Dragon Dictate, in the mid-1990s, if you can imagine anything more laborious, and how the Red Sox were going to do this year, which I knew he was doing to curry favor with me. And I just, at no point did he want to talk about, the downsides. And I found it to be overwhelming almost. And he actually authored 2 books around marketing to people with disabilities, which at that time you would never see someone with a disability in any kind of advertising in the 1990s. Now it's become much more normalized. And to sort of see his process and how he was able to avoid institutionalization and continue working, and all the support structure that had to be in place to coordinate that, unbeknownst to me at the time, had a huge impact on my decision to want to work with those kind of patients and quarterback all of those moving parts. And I'm sure, as Dr. Levy can attest, some days that quarterbacking is easier than others. But I want you guys to know that what a personal impact that has had on me, and how much of that spirit that I see reflected here today. It's very gratifying. Thank you for allowing me the chance to speak on that.
Oh, thanks, Kevin, for sharing this fantastic story, lesson, or segment of life. Rosie Curiel, if we can listen to you before you disappear to celebrate your 10th wedding anniversary. Tell us a little bit.
I'll be here. Thank you. I too am very, very delighted to be here and share. I've been able to work with patients from, when they get off the helicopter on trauma, in through the ICU, to subacute, to rehab, and then as outpatients, and I get to see some really thrive. And so that's just a tremendous privilege to be able to work with people across that continuum. And so, my clinical work with people who have experienced injury or illness is really, my role is to help them voluntarily confront their suffering, right? And to take necessary steps to be able to harness the courage that they need to have, sometimes under the most trying conditions. And so, as a psychologist, really contrary to popular belief, I don't protect people from the things that they fear. I don't. My role is to journey with them as they take a look into this dark abyss, so that they can bear their burdens in a proper form. Right? And so that's just a beautiful privilege to be able to walk with someone on their journey as they're navigating some of those hardships. And so again, I'm just happy to be able to share what I can today. Thank you for including me.
Thanks, Rosie. Teresa, again, you've had tons of time to prepare for this since yesterday afternoon. Thank you for joining us, and just give us a glimpse of what you do in Tübingen, and go ahead and your story that you told me.
Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for the kind invitation. I really feel honored to be here with all of you. So I think my work, so I'm a psychologist. I work with stationary patients, so neurosurgical stationary patients. So I never get the chance to do a lot of psychotherapy because we are talking about very short periods of time where they are actually with us. So I kind of see myself more as a, I don't know how to say it, but first aid kit for psychological issues, and not the classical psychotherapist that can do a prolonged job along the time. But what I think what mostly brings me here, and maybe brings us more together, it's the fact that I started doing my PhD in a Max Planck Institute in Tübingen in 2010, and I couldn't speak one word of German. So my work with my stroke patients that all have complete paresis of one arm, and I was trying to understand the cortical physiology and the cortical functionality of the motor cortex. So my language with these patients was the electrophysiological language. So the only thing I could see from them was the potentials of their brains, and the only thing that I could feed back was some kind of stimulation to their brains in those first years. And then once after, so like 5 years after I've started, and I had, you can imagine when you work on a laboratory with this kind of materials, so transcranial magnetic stimulation, electric stimulation, robotics, prothesis, so everything possible, intelligence, artificial intelligence, and Amadeus, so this interface in between cortex and robots. So after 5 years, I had all the possible motor maps of my own brain, because everything I would try on patients, I would try first on myself. So I had kind of a good knowledge about my own motor cortex and how it worked and everything. And I just got a bad virus infection, stomach infection, and by vomiting, the effort of vomiting, because I have a small a slight degeneration on C5 and C6. By vomiting, I fainted, and I just couldn't move anymore. So both arms and legs, and this state was for more than 24 hours like this. Then I started feeling my feet, some stars on my feet, and very slowly, so after 3 days I could move already the legs but not the upper part, the arms, and then slowly until the full recover. The problem is that when I had this problem, I was not in Tübingen, so I was taken into another hospital that was not my husband's hospital. So he got a call to the surgery room saying that his wife had a stroke and couldn't speak anymore. And the problem is that I couldn't speak German. I could speak, but I couldn't speak in German, and that's what I was trying to tell them. So he immediately went to the other city to try to pick me up, and I'm so thankful that they didn't have a functional MRI there, so he was able to remove me from there and bring me to Tübingen in order to have the functional MRI. But when I entered my hospital and I saw, the first face that I saw when I was getting out of the ambulance was my colleague of research that just looked at me and said, "What the hell are you doing there?" And I said, "I don't know, but you are going to take me to the TMS room, and I'm going to map myself again because I want to see what's happening here. I want to see my cortical mapping to have some answers, to see what can I expect from this situation or not." And this produced then a paper where I can show with imaging, and this, I think this was the first paper with TMS that can really show a cortical shift of the motor area during this acute period, so a couple of hours after the injury. So I think this is what I'm here, like with open heart, to more as a patient, as a psychologist.
Fantastic. Really, it's an amazing coincidence. Thank you so much. Bernard, why don't you lead off with the questions to Hunt?
Well, again, to Hunt and David, thank you both for being here today. And Hunt, to the degree you're comfortable, tell us a little bit about where you were in life, both maybe personally and professionally, at the time of the injury, and tell us a little bit about how you were injured, perhaps to the degree you're comfortable, and just up to the point of getting to the hospital, because we're going to pick up on the hospital with another question later. But just that period, what was on your mind, and where were you in life, and so on.
You're muted, Hunt.
Got it. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
You know, I appreciate that, Bernard, and that introduction. I was at actually a very good place in life. I'd been a department chair for 25 years, and that if you've done that job for 25 years, you need psychotherapy badly. And so there were obviously frustrations that went with that, but many blessings. And I had a charmed life with a family background of the arts and athletics. My own sports career had been incredibly rewarding. And then medicine, and went to Mount Olympus and got to be a neurosurgeon. And then even within that rarefied air, had the phenomenal gift of being able to do the things that we can do under the microscope, that we learn to do, that we're the elegance of those procedures, the athleticism of those procedures, and the impact on the lives of those we treat. It's just a gift beyond belief. I was convinced that I never wanted to be operated on by a 70-year-old neurosurgeon. And at that time, I was 69, or right at 69, and I had already announced that I was going to retire. I gave them a 1.5 year notice, and that retirement was going to be at the end of December 2020. I was really looking forward to life after neurosurgery. I didn't want to be. I told the dean I never wanted to be having lunch at the white table. The white table was in our faculty club. It had nothing to do with the skin color of the participants, and there was no hair on the head, but there was hair in the ears and the nose, and that was white of those people that sat there. And I wanted to be doing other stuff. I was thinking about grandchildren. I was thinking about travel, golf trips with my many wonderful friends, and continuing on, of course, with the ACGME and the University Interscholastic League, which oversees 900,000 young athletes in Texas. And I thought that, and also looking forward to mentorship for young people at Southwestern and at the Mayo Clinic, as Bernard and I had discussed over some time. And I was mostly looking forward to never, ever opening Epic again, and never, ever having a mandatory compliance time-driven course for each freaking hospital that we covered. So those were some good things. So I was actually in a very good frame of mind. And my only health concern over the years might have related to my marathoning, and I got paroxysmal atrial fibrillation and underwent an ablation procedure by a really expert cardiologist a year prior to my injury. And during that preparatory work, I had trouble with one of the beta blockers. It gave me orthostatic hypotension. A year later, I developed a few episodes of atrial flutter. And they were actually thinking I might need a minor tune-up to that ablation. And I was put on that same beta blocker again. And they were just going through the analytics about whether to do it or not and so forth. And I was not in an arrhythmia, but I was on that drug. And I stood up one night out of bed to go to the restroom and lost consciousness, fell forward. I was unconscious. I don't know what I hit. I ended up on the floor on my face down, and I couldn't move, and I couldn't turn over. Jan tried to help and couldn't. And luckily we had, I'm sorry?
You couldn't breathe either.
Oh, I was having trouble breathing, according to Jan. But it was because of the COVID shutdown. My daughter, Devin, and her husband, Roy, were in the house, and they woke Roy up, and he came and turned me over, and the ambulance came and took me to, they wouldn't take me to UT Southwestern because of distance. They took me to Presbyterian Hospital, where we had a new relationship with UT Southwestern, and I had just recruited 4 full-time faculty led by Dr. Chris Taylor. And that's when I encountered Chris in the emergency room. Is that where you want me to stop, Dr. B, or do you want me to?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, thank you for sharing all that, Hunt. That really does set the stage. Thank you.
Fadi, you want to chat with David about the same question?
Is he muted?
Did we lose him?
Are you muted, Fadi?
Maybe his internet, because he came in and out.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, David, I'll take over as always. I'm bailing Fadi out of everything he does, but David, can you just take us through the same kind of, the same question? Look,
I think I could want to probably start with waking up. I didn't realize I lost consciousness. I was like Hunt, face down, my arms behind me, and I had an hour where I bargained with myself and stopped thinking about my career, stopped thinking about all the things that aren't on your gravestone kind of thing. And I realized that they weren't important to me. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't be ambitious. I mean, it doesn't mean we shouldn't do good things in life. It just means that when it's all taken away from you, I went through an acceptance where I was just thinking about what my life would be during that time, and what it did. It's not grit or resilience. It was over, and it just unwound the next, few hours and days. Just like Teresa and Hunt, we get our movement back, and but what I was left with after that was a tremendous amount of gratitude. I felt very blessed, and a lot of the things that used to bother me were gone. A lot of things that my resentments, my times where I might have been wronged, that I held to me and wouldn't let go, are gone, because during that time I realized the importance of living in the moment, and that we're only living in the moment every day. The past is gone, and we can't really control the future, and so you're living in the moment constantly. And I was in that moment. I lost it all, and it's just resonated with me. And so all this other stuff evaporated. So I just want to live my life like that now. I'm really excited to come back and to be the same but different, and to maybe approach the things that I do from a different countenance. I think that maybe the purpose of, when you asked me to do this, I think that's what I wanted to impart on the group that chose to be here tonight, that as well as to Hunt and to Teresa, if possible, is that that this experience can be a good thing. And I'm lucky enough to have recovered. Not everyone recovers, and I think some of our other guests are probably more familiar with what that means, whether it's Alan or Dalal or
Rosie.
Dr. Curiel. Yeah. You see people maybe at their worst, and I really feel like now I'm at my best, and I feel like I'm psychologically more prepared than I've ever been because of where I've come from. And we can all get there. It's a matter of, I've read a lot about Stoicism, about ethics, about Buddhism, and I think in some ways that prepared me when this happened. My brain was kind of open to it, and it's deeply incorporated into myself. And I'm very grateful to have a friend like you, have a friend like Fadi, and to tell you I love you, and that's okay. I think the people that I work with every day, Raf and John and the team at my hospital, what they've done for me and the feelings I've had for them, it's deeply effective. And I've gone back to my own hospital to be operated on by Dan and Mitch, and to have the experience to have just professionals take care of me. I had some blind spots too. I think you can't teach to people what you don't know. And if you think you know everything, then you're not going to have a chance to learn. And I had a blind spot for nursing and for, PT and OT and rehabilitation medicine, and for the just incredible. I'm just much more open to that. I think that's the beauty of this, and the reason why this talking tonight was I was so excited to do it.
That's great, David. Hunt, just take us through, some of the. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, Jacques, do you mind if I just throw in?
Yeah. Go ahead.
David, if I may. You're a celebrity in neurosurgery, and certainly a celebrity amongst your friends like me and others. But you're also a celebrity on Netflix with a show you were on that was, by the way, amazing. Where were you in life before this happened? The minute before this happened, could you tell because I'm sure many of our audience members know you, but some of them may not. And where were you in your life professionally and personally, to the degree you're comfortable?
Yeah, I could talk about that. Look, I've always been a little bit of an outlier professionally, doing things a little bit differently. Not always. I've been more North Star than Gold Star, if you approach it that way. And I've had, both personally and professionally, I've had challenges. I think I was at a really good place. My kids were in a great spot. My wife and I were looking forward to, my youngest just went to Northwestern. I started her as a freshman. Was really looking forward to this time, like Hunt was talking about those golden years when you're still healthy and you can and enjoy your time, and that you can spend it with my love of your life. I was definitely looking forward to that. And professionally, I've overcome a lot of, I've strived to do good things. I mean, Netflix was a blessing and a curse, to be honest. I mean, it created a lot of things locally that were quite interesting. But I feel like I've been able to have a big impact on young people, which was the original intent. That's why I did it, so my children would see the type of person that I was, and that people who didn't know me would come and look for mentorship. And that's proven to be really the truth. And the celebrity thing, it's like chewing gum. It tastes good for a little while, and then you need another piece of gum. It's an endless, it's an endless thing. It's never enough gum. So I think that's where I was with that. But, more importantly, when you're down on the ground like that, and your mind is you're going 0, but your mind's going 1,000 miles an hour. My dad had a stroke, and I remember seeing him on the ground, hemiplegic, and not, before I even went to medical school. And I just didn't want my kids and my family to see me like that. And luckily my wife, who I've skied with probably 99% of the time on the mountain, she wasn't there, and she didn't see me like that. My son didn't see me like that. I think these were the things that where I was. And so ultimately, when you're broken down and you're really at 0, it's like dying in a way. It's like a near-death experience. I think the stuff that really, that these things go away, and what you're left with is these core values. And now I can live with those core values and live with that experience, and hopefully bring that to people who haven't had a chance to, or haven't taken, I told one friend of mine, I said, look, a lot of people called, and, one of my best friends came from Boston to spend the day with me, a guy named Mike Trotsky. And, I think it was Mike or somebody else I was telling that, if I knew that I could experience what I experienced, I would do it again. Like if I knew. And I think he said to me, listen, Dave, if you knew when you're on the ground, quadriplegic, that you were going to be okay, it wouldn't have been the same thing. You had to go through that like mind-numbing experience of losing everything and then accepting it. And then it wasn't grit or resilience. I just started getting better. That's just an incredible thing to experience. And I think Teresa and Hunt probably have a similar reaction. I would imagine that you become very grateful for the small things. And we all should be like that.
David,
Go ahead.
Thanks for saying all of that. And kind of what comes to mind for me, it's almost like I'm hearing you say that, almost like if you have a new parts of you that you're living more fully, or you're experiencing a new life in some ways, or you're experiencing yourself in new ways or in more full ways. Is that right?
Look, when I was in rehab, it was like an ashram. I was 20 miles away from my family, which is how maybe it's like 200 miles away. I was in exit 38 in the LIE, which is it takes 2 hours to get there from Manhattan sometimes. And I spent a lot of time alone. I had double vision because I blew out my orbit also. I couldn't really read. But all the time I was there, I never turned the TV on. And I just was experiencing this gratitude. I can't even explain it. And I remember the first time that I noticed it was when I was in the ambulance going back to rehab from the hospital after my first operation. I was really listening for the first time. I listened to people, but I was really listening. And this is just one of the EMTs who I, was really interested in who he was. And we got into a conversation. It turns out that he had been on Wall Street and he blew up with drugs and left his wife. And how he kind of had a similar experience. We exchanged notes about the difference between that kind of, failure and losing your functions. And that was like in a 1 hour ambulance ride. And it was, when I came back, I realized I sort of had found this sort of enlightenment. And I'm seeing a psychologist. I don't want to lose it. I don't want to go back to work and suddenly everything goes back to where it was before. And I think I hope it doesn't take any work. It's like a shock to your brain. And I intend to use it. And because it's very powerful. And hopefully we can all learn from that.
And the gratitude piece really keeps it alive,
Yeah. And I'm gratitude, Mike. It's funny, when I saw Jacques putting this together, this man is he's a beast. I mean, his presence, like the energy he puts into things and the way that he, organizes it. You see that kind of effort to do something that's really unique. And, all I feel is gratitude, and whether it's Bernard or even, I called Hunt. Unfortunately, I didn't have Teresa's phone number. I would have called you too, but Hunt and I had a great discussion about what he'd been through. And I know that each of our stories are a little bit different, but, I feel like that we're on this, that sharing this is very important, and I'm not afraid of it. I'm not afraid of someone calling me out, some lawyer someday, that I was in a spinal cord. Come on. I mean, I think that I'm very open and I want to, if anybody benefits, I benefit a lot from this. Hopefully other people can too.
If I can interject, that's fantastic, David. I'm gonna, by the way, the audience who are with us, we're close to 200 people. Put in any questions that come through your mind, put them in the Q&A box, not the chat box. So I'm gonna pause. One of our colleagues, Michael Yang, is asking you, Hunt and David, that the evidence of steroids for spinal cord injury, as you know, is controversial. Would you have wanted your MD to have given you steroids on admission? Have they? I don't know if they've given you steroids or not. And maybe after you do that, I'll ask Alan Levy to chime in and give us his thoughts. Hunt?
That is an incredibly hard question. I think by the injury that I had, steroids would not be a bad strategy. Particularly after I had my canal was very tight, but then after it was opened, I would not have been opposed to steroids at all. And I wasn't in necessarily a high risk group that would have counted for that additional morbidity, mortality that those patients had in the trials.
David?
It's funny, going back to my injury, when I was on the ground, I was face down and the ski patrol person says to me, are you okay? I said, no, I'm effing quadriplegic, something like that. I'm not okay. And then they asked me, I said, what I did tell them is I don't want to, go on 3 lifts and 4 runs to get to the bottom. I just don't want to be moved very much. I thought my head was turned. I thought I had a bad fracture and canal compromise. So all I asked them to do is fly me off the mountain. I forget steroids, just don't put me on a sled and take me all the way to the bottom of the mountain. And lo and behold, she called her dispatch and she says, are you sure you're a neurosurgeon? I was like, yes, I'm a neurosurgeon. She goes, he says he's a neurosurgeon. Okay, we're flying. It was like that. I'm like, really? I was like, so keeping calm and just sort of telling her. That was the first step. When I got to Denver, I started to get better. And this question came up, and I think I called Dan Shuba or Griffin Baum or one of the guys back home. They both said, or as I recall, and I had a fair, I can't remember everything, but, the message was, if you're getting better, just leave it alone, and I think steroids have a downside, and I was getting better so quickly that we were all in agreement that there's no huge benefit. We don't see a huge benefit, and I think we just left well enough alone and decided to stay away from them because the evidence isn't great.
Alan, any remarks on the steroid issue?
I mean, this is such an incredible session, and it's a critical session because of the emotions that it brings out in our speakers and everybody listening. And steroids have 30 years of science behind them, and it's crazy to think that we cannot agree about whether they're valuable or not. But so I won't be able to answer that question yes or no. I think that if someone is incomplete and it's a neuroprotective agent, it probably has more value than if someone is certainly complete or thoracic, and that's what I would tell you. But bringing it back to the real important topic about why we're here today, people who are advocates of steroids but maybe don't have the science will always bring this up. Well, if it was you or your kid and there's nothing else available, wouldn't you take the steroids? And so I think that's why that question is particularly relevant today, because we don't have a lot of treatments, and steroids are one of the few that may have some evidence for it. And so there's no yes or no for that question, but it is something that people always evoke. If you had, they say, if you had an injury, wouldn't you want to take it? So I'm glad that question was answered, or asked at least, not answered.
Hunt, take us perhaps briefly through the inpatient hospital stay and surgery. And obviously, we're not, particularly interested in the technical aspects that went on, but obviously interested in your emotion through this issue. Here you are on the patient side, decision to be operated on, who operates on you, all those issues that all of us neurosurgeons, we are in the know. Just take us through your thoughts with that.
Yeah, I had a little bit different experience than David did. And part of it may be my background, and I've been athletic all my life, as both an athlete and as a surgeon. And I told Chris Taylor, that my resident colleagues that were there, I said, look, guys, gals, we all know that there are a lot of things worse than death on this earth. And I might well have one of those things. And I do not desire to survive that. Any questions? And there were no questions. And Chris said, well, you've got some movement in your definitely right leg and your right arm. I want a shot at this. I want to get this decompressed. Carlos Bagley was not at that hospital, but he was on standby and he was consulted as well. And he agreed. And I said, okay. And they did an anterior procedure. And after that, I was awakened and I had actually pretty darn good right lower extremity function and some hand movement as well. Not normal, but it was pretty good. And Chris found I had this old cervical disc at C6-7 in the 90s with a posterior procedure, and there was a little bit of a calcific indentation of the dura posteriorly. And Chris said, I want to take you back and I want to open that up wide as well, just to give you the best possible shot. And I said, okay, do it. So that was out. I was out of surgery after the night was over. And one of my dear friends, Dr. Mark Hadley, was contacted by my family. And he immediately said, I'm coming. So that was a kind of a problem. No, it was a good thing. He's a wonderful friend. And but I had to sort of prep my physician and nursing teams over at Presbyterian Hospital that an individual who's an expert in the area, but not licensed in the state of Texas, was coming, and they said, well, it's totally fine. And I said, well, you need to be aware. And actually, Bernard said that Mark might be on the phone, And so I'll go ahead and tell you what I was going to tell you. And I told them, the healthcare team, I said, look, if you took a totally normal 18-year-old boy who's very athletic and put in a PICC line and infused a lethal dose of testosterone every day of the rest of his life, by the time he got to be 65, they would be Mark Hadley. And so needless to say, they were prepped and they were not surprised when he came in. And he was stalking the hall saying, no, God damn it. I said 8. The number needs to be 8 on cord perfusion. And it was absolutely hilarious. And I really felt terrifically cared for by not only the healthcare team, but also Mark Hadley. And those were very hard times because I had essentially nothing in the leg. And my left hand was pretty well shot as well. And I am a left-handed pitcher and surgeon. So that's what was in the acute phase. And the next phase of my care was really after I was transferred back to UT Southwestern, which had its own set of issues for the rehab care. I'll deal with that an hour later. It's your call, Jacques.
Let's keep it till later. Well, let's ask David his inpatient experience. Choosing his surgeons, the surgeries, so forth. David, enlighten us.
The most amazing thing for me throughout the course was the number of women that were involved in healthcare. From the woman ski patrol person to the flight nurse to the female neurosurgeon at Denver. What's her name? Kathy. I gotta remember her last name. To the nursing at Denver, to the nursing at Lenox. I'll skip Dan and Mitch, and then there's so many women that were involved in my care. It was breathtaking, and it just shows you how women have become so important in healthcare, and it's important for us to recognize that in our field, certainly. As far as choosing a surgeon, there was no question I was going to come back to my home. There are definitely disadvantages to having surgery in your own hospital. I was discouraged by some people not to do it. I think it's something we all think about as surgeons. Like, if I had X, what would I do? I think I've thought about that, not a spinal cord injury, but I've thought about other things. And I had complete confidence in the guys. And, I made a bit of a mistake, I think, the first time. I remember I'd known that Ed Benzel had chosen a sort of a junior guy to do his carotid, and he felt that he was capable. And, there were a couple of reasons why I originally asked one of my junior guys to do it. Primarily was I was uncomfortable putting really Mitch Levine in a situation where he was taking care of me like that. I thought that we were very close friends, and I would have a hard time operating on Mitch, to be honest. So I was uncomfortable with that. And Dan Schuba, our chair, who's a wonderful spine surgeon, Lenox Hill wasn't his primary home. And to ask him with me, with a pretty dangerous thing, to come over to the hospital, I wanted him to be there. But I thought that I could sort of manipulate this, and that's the mistake you make, and I think it's hard not to do that. And I think Griffin, fortunately, I think he came, we were all together. In fact, there's a whole stoic thing about getting your faculty together and overcoming the bonds of friendship and kinship when you make decisions, to avoid, love or friendship as part of the decision making, because it can take you awry. And we were all there, and Griffin came to me with all of us. My son and wife were there, and basically just sit down and say, David, I can't operate on you. I can't. And he was very honest, and I give him a lot of credit for doing that, and not, trying to sort of wing it or come up with some way. If he was uncomfortable, he was honest. And he's a guy who's 38 years old, but he acts like he's 58. And so Dan and Mitch were there, and we looked at each other and we said, let's go. And it was the best way of handling it. We were all together, and I had complete confidence in these people, and I put my life in their hands. And I know how difficult this was, but I hope someday I'm given the opportunity to take care of people like I got taken care of. That's all I got to say, And this is really a profoundly impactful time. And I think you can't prepare yourself for this, even if you think you can, because you want to do the right thing for yourself, for your family, and for those around you. And you really sometimes, and your mind isn't always able to cut through that. So it's something that comes to you late.
Go
So
ahead.
Hunt, Fadi here, and I just wondered if you would go ahead and, well, I think we're all mesmerized by what you said earlier and what David is saying. Could you continue with then what happened and then what as you progressed, because your progression was slower, you were nowhere near normal, and you had to make this initial decision and then another decision. So then how did things progress through rehab, and were you still at this mindset that was pretty tough to even hear, let alone live through what you told us? How did you progress through that through your rehab?
One interesting thing that you might enjoy, when I was transferred back to UT Southwestern, to the hospital that I did the first operation at that hospital when it was open in 1989. So it was a little bit awkward, and the nursing staff came to me and said, "Look, you've got to have an alias when we readmit you, we admit you here, to protect you, so people will be all dropping by the room all the time." And so I decided that I would take the alias of Jose Jimenez. For those of you that are old enough, you remember Jose Jimenez was the first wonderful Hispanic comic in the television era. And he would always, whatever the question, my name, Jose Jimenez. So and then the nurses called me Dr. Jose. And so we got going, and I got going with therapy. And I had a fantastic physical therapist, and his name was Edward. And I kept calling him Ivan. And he said, "Sir, why do you call me Ivan?" I said, "Well, because you're Ivan the Terrible." Ivan the Terrible executed tens of thousands of people in the 1500s who probably deserved it. And I want you to kick me so hard every day, all day long. Kick me and make like you've never done before, all day long. At the end of this, I want to walk out of here with a golf bag on my shoulder and a pine box, and frankly, I don't give a shit. And he was a little stunned, shall we say, but he was a fantastic person. I've got videos of him back there pushing on a walker, pushing that leg forward, and just incredible help that I very much appreciate. And then a few days after I arrived, I woke up in the middle of the night, and as those of you that are rehab physicians, you know, the beds are terrible. You slide down, they're slippery, and I woke up in a terrible position, and my head was all cockeyed, and I was hurting like crazy. And I took a deep breath, and I realized I couldn't breathe. And I said, "Well, I got to get my head straightened." I did, and then once I got straightened up, I realized that I had a pulmonary embolus, bad, barely moving air. And that was another decision point, not knowing, where this was going, and was confronted with a fairly easy exit for all concerned. The question was whether to ring the bell or not. And that it was a difficult 10 minutes, quite honestly, to sort through it, middle of the night, 3 in the morning. And ultimately, for better or worse, I rang the bell. And the doctor came, and she was a wonderful person. And she, told her the history, and she hadn't seen the chart, and she was brand new at that institution, and so didn't know who I was. And finally said, she was talking about dimers and stuff. I said, "Look, I'm telling you that I've had a major pulmonary embolus, and I need a spiral CT now." He said, "Well, we could do that." I said, "Yes, we will. We will do that now." So the nurses take me down And they actually turned the wrong way when we got out of the elevator. And I knew where we were. They were taking me to the MRI. I said, no, excuse me, we got to go back the other way. And they were unfazed. And I saw over the top of my bed one of our residents, Tarek Al-Amadea, that Bernard knows well. And Tarek said, "Sir, are you okay?" I said, "Nope, I've had a PE." He said, "Not to worry, sir, I'll take care of it." He grabbed the bed, he pushed me back to CT and worked with the radiologist as they sorted through the diagnostic, got me an ICU bed. And I was zipped up to the ICU and anticoagulated quickly. So that was an interruption of the recovery phase. So I was about 10 days without therapy because of the PE and DVT. Once that cleared, I got back in the saddle, and they got after it again. And it was really an amazing adventure where I would see. I remember one night I was moving around bed, and all of a sudden I saw areas of my quadriceps contract. Like, wow. And then each day there was another muscle group, arm or leg, that was coming back. And that was where I got really excited and pushed on full throttle to hell or not. We're gonna do this. And it was really that was, I think, that decision, which comes easy for us as neurosurgeons, used to adversity, sports used to adversity, you overcome by extreme effort and commitment and unwavering discipline. And it came back little by little, and I'm very grateful for those early two decisions that were made.
So Hunt,
yeah,
I want to ask a follow-up question, because this is really deep here. We've all dealt with this. I've myself asked myself that question many times, because we see it through our patients. You know, many of us would say, if this, then, as you put it, I'll ring the bell. Or if that, forget it. Life is not worth it for me. Maybe you and Dave can win. But you mentioned it. So there was that moment where life became worth living, or where it was dear enough, or whatever you want to fill in the blanks. But if personally, if you can help us understand, and maybe Dave can weigh into that, there was a turning moment, you said, but could you really put a finger on what can we bottle out of this to use maybe?
I think that's a complicated question, Fadi, and its predicate is that I had already had a spectacular life, a life that I was so proud of and pleased with. I'd lived more in those 69 years than almost any human being ever gets the honor of living, in every way. And that made it where it was a real question. I've already had so much. And then I think beginning to, once it was progressing and I was getting function back, then all the juices turned on full speed to win it, period. You're going to win it.
You know, I can tell you, I mean, I when I was lying there like that, and I kind of like, I kept thinking, you know, as bad as it was, and is this worse than death? I kind of accepted and started moving beyond it and starting to say, okay, I'm gonna have to sell my apartment and we'll move to the beach. I'll live in a wheelchair, and I have a great life, and I won't operate anymore, but I'll do this and that. And I think getting there, and then to the point where I kind of accepted it, and it's very easy, I think, to fall. And then some of the questions in the thing are about like what's really important in your life, like what things really matter. Like it's your family, It's the things that, you know, if you're sitting in a chair with just a head, like what would you need to be happy? And that's kind of what I was thinking about it. I don't know how I would have reacted like a week later if I was still quadriplegic and people were cleaning me up and stuff. But in that moment, and you know, I think that's the threshold we cross, and to come back to life. I think, you know, Hunt's doing. I know you're doing. I know you keep wanting to do well, and you keep wanting to get back to 100%, and it's a probability you're going to get there. You know, I think that we're lucky enough to have experienced that and realize what's really, really important to our lives. And I think that's the thing that hopefully you'll learn from talking tonight.
Yeah, can I add a follow-up question to that question? Are we doing okay?
Yeah. When you finish, maybe I'll ask Kevin to weigh in on his approach to patients, like in rehab. Well, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, but so Hunt and David, what I wanted to ask is, you're both athletes and both surgeons, heavily dependent on your physical ability. So you're part of your identity, your soul, if I may, is your athleticism, both surgically and, you know, in the various types of athletic activities you both enjoy, but be it golf or skiing, etc. How did that factor into what impact did that have? You know, there are some professions where if you can't move your left arm, you could still be an architect. There are some things that people, like, you could be a poet or a philosopher, or, you know, you could do things. There's, you know, World War II was won by somebody in a wheelchair. But there are some professions that are very heavily dependent on, if we can't use our hands, we can't really operate well. So tell me, did that factor into your initial thinking, or the emotional impact of what you went through in those early hours or days?
For sure, I couldn't envision living in a completely dependent way. That was not what I would consider living. And I'm from West Texas, so being a poet is probably not in the offering. If it's got more than 2 syllables, I can't even say it. But I think the goal that was started that I had was, I asked Kathy Bell, our chair of PM and ARP, very experienced, knowledgeable woman, and I said, "Will I be able to walk again?" And she actually lied to me and said yes. And I said, "Golf," and she said yes. She lied, or she thought she was lying. And later, when I ran into her in the hall at the medical school, and I was walking independently, and was already on the golf range, and she said, "This would not have happened if it weren't for a life of sports, conditioning, and repetitive physical activity." And I think it's not just muscle memory, it's neuromuscular connectivity and maybe plasticity that we all develop that because of life of movement. And that, I think that, as much as anything, has gotten me as much recovery as I have. And it just has to be fiercely pursued. And I've had some great therapists and great friends. Mike Singletary was so helpful to me. He would come and visit in the hospital. Mike's a Hall of Famer, NFL, if you don't know, and he's an incredible human being. And I developed power in my left leg, but I was having trouble committing to it. And he really helped me work through that process. You've got to, it's like getting in position, and then you've got to decide on an activity and then commit to it and do it. And that was really, that thought process is how you relearn how to walk. And it was very, very, very valuable to me.
Kevin, how do you approach a patient in rehab? I mean, I guess you must lie sometimes, no, to encourage patients, or just tell us.
So that's actually a very it's a provocative ethical quandary, right? To what extent, how much do you give away? And to what extent do you want to be the straight shooter versus someone that wants to maintain hope? And everyone has a different approach. You know, this is the kind of thing which I know it may sound trite, but it's the art that is not taught, right? So how, and the right answer is whatever it takes to connect. But my predilection is I won't lie. Like if I don't think that the outcome is going to be favorable, and everyone here is, and I'm sure in the role reversals that you two have had, especially the whole I'm walking out of here mentality, which I'm sure on the other side of the operating table you've heard many times, and you knew deep inside, or not even deep, that that's not going to happen. But what is the marginal utility of announcing that, or of revealing that? So, and I'm sure Rosie has a lot of experiences with, and Mario, Dr. Oliveira, and I, the psychologists I've worked with here since I've gotten here, we've gone round and around about this exact type of question. I've been on ethics panels, specifically dealing with in terms of cancer diagnoses, and is it okay to say that word, and is it okay to talk about prognoses? In a certain respect, that experience, and I know that analogy is not perfect, because a cancer prognosis can be very different from a spinal cord issue for many ways, but the goal is to be able to give a sense of short-term versus long-term. I think if we focus too much on the finish line, then in the beginning it can be inspiring. I'm going to walk out of here and that kind of language. But I think in day 5 and day 10 and day 15, and nowadays we're not given much more than that. Back when I started here, there was things day 30 and it will emotionally wear someone out if they just don't see those incremental gains, and people are going to intellectualize that until we realize it's not happening. So I want to make sure that we balance the expectation of, hey, that is a long-term goal. Here and now, today, I want to see that we have predictable sensory responses, that we know that when you are having this kind of input, that is something that is an external environmental cue, and not one of these autonomous neuropathies or spasticities. And I go through a lot of pains to explain what those things mean. Doc, is this good? Does this mean I'm getting better? Does this mean the nerves are working out? My friends, I Googled and they tell me that this means I'm getting better. I'm like, well, but I don't think there's value in overselling that also to keep people in a good mood. I think a lot of times physicians, the reason they avoid, not to mislead, is because they feel the need to create an emotional distance between themselves and the patient so that they can go on to the next case and to the next case. Because if you really try to absorb everything on a personal level and be totally relatable, it can emotionally exhaust the physicians as well. So I try and compartmentalize things, like let's focus on what we can do short term. If I'm asked directly, do you honestly think that I'm going to be able to walk? And if it's a complete injury and I'm very pessimistic inside, the way I usually approach that is I'll say, I think at where you are, and if it's mid-thoracic or something like that, you will be able to completely take care of yourself and be your own person. And if we do our job and train you correctly and guide your caregivers and your families, that you will not need help. But in terms of getting up and walking, I think that's going to take a breakthrough. However, you happen to be in one of the very few places and around in a milieu of expertise where that kind of breakthrough is, I won't say imminent, but it's possible. And I think the best favor you can do for yourself is to keep yourself healthy, keep yourself, avoid that fatalistic mentality, because that will compromise your health in other ways when you start giving up on the little things that you don't see as necessary or or enough of a goal to make a material difference, then you are not going to be first in line for some of these possibilities that are around the corner. And that corner can seem like it's getting further away, and those goalposts can seem to be a mirage sometimes. But I think it's malpractice to say things like, well, we won't know anything. We'll talk about it in a year. I don't think doctors do that because they're trying to be reassuring. I think they're doing that so they can move on with their day. I think if an oncologist said something like that to someone that had, stage 4 metastases, that they should probably lose their license. People need to know how to get their affairs in order, or what they would like to do, or if it's that bleak, am I really going to spend it here and not with my family? Your goal is not to just paint a picture to be appeasing. Your goal is to be a professional, and you are there to give expertise. Now, I'm on the rehab side, so I cannot pick up my hands and necessarily fix somebody. But if my role is to educate and to make sure that people understand, and one of the great challenges and one of the what I find to be the most gratifying things in a facility and the type of patients we have is to be able to go from one bed, and that might be the CEO of some company, and the very next bed might be someone that got shot in the streets, and that was part of their day-to-day risk profile, assumption of risk they took. And to be able to try and deliver those expectations and to make both of those people trust me and believe, like, I'm not going to lie to you, but I'm going to tell you what's at every step of the way, what we can do with people. There's a vastly different health literacy, vastly different agency, and feelings of trust in systems like this that maybe historically have not been in deserving of trust in that patient's life experience. That to me is the most gratifying thing. It's the closest that we come to that kind of binary, like a surgical solution kind of feeling. But it's a grind to get there. It's not necessarily as easy, but I do take that responsibility very seriously in how language is used with those patients.
No, I think you've touched on the real art of medicine, particularly in our field. And it's a matter of an empathetic motivation to the patient. Never eliminate hope, because in fact, we are not omnipotent, and people can outperform us and surprise the hell out of us, as they do often. But Kathy wasn't lying to me. I was just using that term. She was stretching it a bit, but she also knew me, and not that she liked me, but she knew me. She knew, so she knew I was going to be a hard ass on it, and it, I think the balance of reality and inspiration and hope is kind of where we all have to live in our day-to-day practices.
And I think how she approached you, and you've touched multiple times on your athletic background, and that being a major factor in your build and in your constitution. As someone who's played team sports their whole lives, that's the art of, that's coaching, right? Certain athletes, you need to tell them, I don't know if you have it in you. Like, I need to see something. And to certain athletes, that's the only thing that's going to get them to run through a wall, because they need to prove you wrong. To a different kind of person that does not have that might be the thing that cuts out the light forever. So it is kind of like knowing what button to push and how, while still also maintaining all of these ethical boundaries is like you said, that's the ultimate challenge. And it's the type of thing that's so under emphasized in our training, is how, because it's also not an easy thing to teach. You kind of just have to be comfortable with people, and so many doctors are comfortable with illness and not nearly as comfortable with the people experiencing it, and that makes them uncomfortable. So that creates a distance, and that distance is going to, that entropy almost always goes in a bad direction.
You have to be a little careful. My dad, I kept thinking about my dad's situation when I was really not moving. And, I think that I was very afraid of being told, not being lied to. And I think that, my dad's doctors told me all was going to be better in a year, that it would all get better. It never did. And so we suffered more later because our expectation was he was going to get better. And then when it didn't get better, I got really angry, that why didn't they just weren't honest with me? And then I started seeing scans. Like, there's no way this guy was going to get better now that I knew more about it. But, I think like you said, it's a fine line. And we all do this in our jobs, whether it's neuro-oncology, if we told everybody they're going to be dead in 16 months with the GBM, we wouldn't have these guys, nobody would have any patients. And vascular, they'll have we're always trying to be optimistic. And I think that, the answer really is it's okay to be optimistic, but there's a realistic approach. You have to be honest with people too, and be open to change. But also you have to call a spade and not be, not be, kind of painting a perfect picture all the time when it doesn't exist. It's more, it can hurt more later on.
Dave, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Thanks.
Who's that?
I just wanted to
Rosie.
add something to that. Thanks. It's also important to remember that we have to educate our patients. So I educate my patients. There's 3 types of patients, I say to them. The ones who want to know everything, the ones who don't want to know anything, and then the ones who want to know just enough, tell my wife the rest, right? And, we have to allow them to also instruct us as to how much they want to know. And psychologically, we have to remember too that realization is like an onion, right? It comes in layers. Realization doesn't happen all at once. It just starts to happen in layers. And so I also think it's important, particularly for the trainees that might be listening, to keep in mind that decision isn't unilateral. Sometimes, how much disclosure, when to disclose. Ask your patient, what kind of patient they are and what their comfort level is, so that it helps to guide you. And you can be honest with them. I agree with David, some people just want it up front.
May I take this opportunity to maybe ask Teresa and Rosie maybe to compare notes? I'm interested in, I'm sure the rest of us, how does culture affect patients' expectations? German, US, others,
Jacques, before we move, could I just to follow up on this theme, and I think this is very important, the cultural shift, perhaps. But I think when we started this seminar and you came up with this idea, which is really, I was wondering what I was going to get out of it. But before I forget, I want to say what I think I'm getting out of it, if you don't mind. Which is first, and thanks to you, Hunt and Dave. But Hunt, what I'm getting out of it is this concept, this nebulous concept of motivation, and because at some point you said you got a motivation one way or another. In other words, motivation being finite, right? I mean, it's like you get up in the morning, you say, I'm going to get a cup of coffee. But if the minute you get up, you fall, you twist your ankle, it's raining, blah, 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 the car won't start, you say, screw it, I'm not going to get my cup of coffee anymore, right? You give up. So it's a small example, but in a way, there's like the rat example, the Richter example, where the rats would drown or doesn't drown. So there's something that happens. I think if we want to give a takeaway message that I heard from you, which is that you had a bank account that came through a lifelong, and I think many of us, Dave, would say the same thing, of motivation. And there was an account in the bank built by having overcome adversity, certainly not to this level, smaller levels, working harder, making another rep, running for a little bit longer. But it came, you said, it's multiple repetitions. And what I heard that to be is you had a bank account of motivation that upon which you were able to draw. That's really all I want to say. And I apologize for jumping into this, but I didn't want to forget saying that because that was helpful, at least to me.
No.
If you allow me, I would also like to add a contribute and try to close this before we jump into the other very, very important theme. Rosie, I think you're absolutely right. I think in the hospital, we have a constant dance, partner dance in between the medical team and the patients. And we have to constantly adapt both sides to the needs. And I think what brings us all together here in this meeting and in a hospital, every time somebody is diagnosed with anything and enters a hospital, I think the most problematic thing, it's the loss of control, the sudden loss of control in our lives. Even if it's because we don't move, or it's because we will have then a disease that we can't control anymore. So if we have to this inherent loss of control, if we had any more variables around in the medical system that bring you even more the feeling of not having the control, this makes patients really with anxiety, with fear, not trusting the team or whatever. So I've learned this from this experience, because when I was on the floor, on contrary, so David, when you said that you were on the floor and you said that you were a neurosurgeon, everybody respected it and immediately made something that was positive for you. So I had unfortunately the opposite experience when I was on the floor and I couldn't speak German enough for the team to understand me, and I couldn't move, and they were trying to ask me what did I have. They immediately labeled me as stroke, so I would go to the stroke unit, and I should just shut up, because that would be bad for me if I continue to talk. So every time I tried to talk, they said shh. And this feeling of despair, of not being listened to, it's more terrible than anything else. At that moment, actually, I deserved this moment to think about my life, but nobody gave me the chance. I was really just fighting for my basic rights of being a patient and trying to communicate with the team. And from this, I learned a lot. And I learned that the patient is always right. When I enter a room, it's not in the direct meaning that I say this. It's not that the patient is always right in his words, but if he manifests a need, then it's my turn to try to understand what's wrong, what am I not understanding to fulfill these needs. Because if there is a complaint, there's a cause, and there's a miscommunication, there's a dance that is not being well danced there all the time. So this was one of the things that I wanted to say. And the second was, when I entered my clinic, I had the feeling of being finally at a correct place. And I realized how important it is. It doesn't matter what I have, but I know that I've been good taken care. And this feeling, it's what I always try to give to my patients, because now, Dalal, you said something really, really important, the short goals. More important than to understand what is the long-term goal, is the patient going to recover everything or not. It's to give these short goals, to give the feeling, to retro feedback this feeling of control, so that we are then in more peace with ourselves.
And also, I think one of the reasons that's relevant is by refocusing on short goals instead of just a finish line. Like someone was mentioning being a marathoner. No one talks about running the 26th mile before
exactly.
you know, if you don't know how to run 2 miles, you're going to know if you can't run 2 miles that you're not running 26. So like, let's focus on this, and then you'll be able to intellectualize a little bit better.
And to immediately inform, look, I don't know if you're going to recover or not. I don't know if this disease is going to kill you in a short or in a long time. Now, today, that's not what it matters. It matters that whatever that you have, you are on the perfect place to be, the better place to be taken care. So to decrease the fear. So this was what I've learned from my experience, not in a positive way, because I was not taken care like that, but I'm very grateful that this happened, and I had the opportunity to to be a patient and to see how important it is, not the diagnostic itself. Of course, it also has its weight. I'm not removing it, but the entrance in the medical system and the communication and this dance.
And Dr. Marcos, I know you want to switch topics, but I just want that metaphor
No,
of the
take
bank.
your time. Take your time.
The metaphor of the bank account I found very interesting, but I think one thing that we have to not lose sight of is when we project ourselves onto this patient role, and you've seen yourself as the neurosurgeon, and okay, here I am, this is what I can put up with, this is what I cannot put up with, but I am a world-class athlete, I can do this. We're not starting on an even playing field here. Like if you start from zero at the point of injury, your bank account already has millions of dollars in it, right? It is being invested, has been invested very well for a long time. Your effort, your superlativeness in so many ways has been rewarded time and time again, every single day with prestige, with remuneration, and all of that. And so you have a huge foundation of a reward optimism that is built into everything you've accomplished. Not that people have not faced adversity that are in the positions that you guys are in, but the incredible outcomes of effort that has been one-to-one associated, you know that it's possible. There's a tremendous, I would say the majority of patients that have never had that kind of workways, that have not overcome things like this. And in fact, lots of things that we take completely for granted as totally achievable and not even a big deal. Finishing high school, being able to hold down a steady job, staying out of trouble based on these are patients that bank account is in complete foreclosure by the time they start. So you have to adapt to that patient very differently than the ultra achiever, the 1% of the 1% in terms of accomplishment. It's not going to go the same. And I think sometimes it's easy for us to be like, oh, well, you're a T5. This is what I expect outcome in 3 months versus 6 months versus 1 year. Oh, you're a C5. This is different. You have to look above the neck to get a better idea of what is really the finish line for this person, because look where they started. They may have started a mile behind you.
The only thing I would say is that the films, you know, and I think that the way to prepare is not as much physical as it's spiritual. You know, and I think you have to spend time preparing your mind, and you have to prepare for obstacles. Life has obstacles, whether it's physical in your work and your even play. You know, I wish I played golf instead of skiing. I would have been better off, but I chose to ski. But, you know, in the end, there's two components to this, because ultimately your injury is your injury. No matter how much you try, you can't overcome certain things. And then it becomes dealing with the moment. I think what you said about the marathons, the same thing. You only can deal with the present, what's happening right now. And then you have to go from there. Everything's in the moment. And you have to do the best you can with the information and with the effort you can make. You know, some of these injuries are fixed no matter how much you try. And that's why I think the only you can really affect is your mind and how you filter that stress. And that's why I'm sure part of your jobs, whether you're as a psychologist, as a oncological psychologist, and as a rehab person, is to basically get that person, you know, as you know, prepared in their mind. And then you encounter these biases that have to do with what they've been through. And I think that as a neurosurgeon, we are sometimes forget that. And it's important that we renew that spirituality as best we can, because you never know it's around the corner.
Rosie, Rosie, you had your hand up a second ago, I think.
I did. Thanks so much. I wanted to say, you know, when I was listening to Hunt say that, you know, he saw his quad contract and then he was juiced up, right? So there was a turning point, something happened there. And so psychologists would say, okay, this is positive emotions, right? So the incentive reward system was activated, and this is deep, this is old, this is deep. The incentive reward system was activated. The dopaminergic system was activated. There's the positive emotion. And if I could just in a nutshell say what psychologists really do with people that are confronting this is, you know, we set up a hierarchy of goals. And then we say, okay, let's identify them. This is what we got to work towards. We proceed towards it. The person, you know, achieves it. Dopaminergic output, positive emotion. Next. And so if you move through your treatment in that way with different kinds of positive emotion, gratitude, just the experience of small achievements, we have to keep asking ourselves, what's the next small step? And then what's the next one? And then what's the next one? And so I think that that's really important in terms of trying to harness those goals and help a person move forward. And, I sort of think everybody on the team has to help people do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many fantastic questions coming in. So if you don't mind, let me field a couple of them and ask. I can combine two questions, Alicia and Olivia. Maybe briefly, David, tell us, I mean, the classic question, being a patient, what perception, what changes have happened in your mind being a patient regarding physicians and your experience in the hospital system?
I think the meme is also that a doctor is a patient and suddenly, he was a jerk before and suddenly he becomes sensitive to, how and what he missed with patients. That wasn't really what I experienced. And I feel like I have always been very kind of open soul and open book and very emotionally involved with my patients. And, so, sometimes in ways that other people might find uncomfortable. And what I found was this amazing blind spot I had to nurses and to nurse assistants and to the people that the unsung heroes, the people that, are so critical to your good outcome. Not that I didn't respect them, I just didn't know what they did. I never spent the time. It wasn't that I did care, but I didn't care enough to ask. And what I'm going to do when I go back to work is I'm going to make all of my guys spend a week in the ICU with the nursing and women. When I don't have any women in my department and the attendings, but we should all take that time, spend not just up there for rounds, but spend a week going in the room with the nurses and seeing what they do, what their daily life is like, and watching that happen was just it opened my mind. And that went, whether it was for rehab or the EMTs, everything, and because we're all so dependent on them. And I look forward to using that experience in a positive way when I get back, for sure.
Katie Orico is with us, and she says hi to both of you, well, all of you here. And I'm going to read what she said. Overcoming your injuries and moving forward in such a positive way is incredibly inspirational. Thank you for sharing your stories. I'd like to, and Eric Peterson, my actually neurosurgical partner, has an excellent question that I'm going to read to you again. I'd love your input. Maybe I'll pose it to Hunt first. All of us have bought into the hard-charging journey to chase traditional metrics of success, prestige, titles, cases, publications, etc. Stories such as yours are so inspiring and eye-opening. Yet we all tend to listen and say, wow, amazing, I need to be more mindful and don't push so hard. And then we get some email or text and our mind goes right back to the old operating system of focusing on the urgent but not important parts of life. What would you say to your 35-year-old self to avoid this, Hunt? I don't know. I don't know if I read it too fast or you got the gist of it.
Was that all Katie's question?
No, this is Eric Peterson, my partner, neurosurgical
I see.
partner.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if I understand your question right, it's to me at 35.
Yes.
What would I tell me
to do now that you've correct? Now that you've gone
prepare
through
for this.
Yeah.
What I would say is that, and at 35, I was doing marathons. And there's something unique about that experience. The last hour of a marathon, when you have no systemic carbohydrate, you are the emperor with no clothes. You've got nothing. And you're out there and you're an hour from the end. It is nothing but agony. For those marathoners on the audience, I know you know what I'm talking about. It is ugly. And you have to simply put one foot in front of the other over and over and over until it stops. And I think that mentality of looking at the long haul, it's going to be ugly, it's going to be hard, and you can do it. And you have to do it. You have to finish. You have to get to destination. And I think that if I hate to use the sports metaphors too often, but that is really what it boils down to. And I think the other thing is, I would say to that 35-year-old is celebrate the joy of your practice, of movement, the simple thing of movement. It is one of the great pleasures of life. Savor every day, because someday you may not have it, and you have to fight to get it back, because it's a treasure that you must fight for. That's what I tell that silly 35-year-old fellow from West Texas.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think, you know, in 2 generations, no one will remember you, number one. And, you know, I think you have to focus on the things that are important. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't be ambitious or, you know, want to be, you know, excel and be thought of as an outstanding person, doctor, husband, father, brother, whatever. But these things ultimately don't matter that much. And I think that it does, unfortunately, going through experience like this brings that, you know, to the top, and for better or worse. But I think it's, if Hunt and I could, you know, impart anything on this group, and Teresa for that matter, is that, you know, just, it doesn't mean you shouldn't work hard. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try to be ambitious and, you know, run Zoom conferences, but just remember what really matters. And I hate to keep bringing it up, but I've read a ton of Ryan Holiday, Stoic philosophy, Marcus Aurelius, just incredible stuff. And it has really helped me before, and it's helping me now. And I think it goes a long way to finding a spiritual place to put your mind.
So could I follow up on that with something that was mentioned earlier, which is both of you, or all of you, Teresa, everybody, mentioned something related to some sort of an awakening, a certain finding of a place in oneself that brought a degree of enlightenment, for lack of a better term. But you also said that I think you did, at least you, David, that I hope it lasts, and I don't want to leave that spot. I want to stay in that zone. With Teresa smiling, the biggest fear is that it doesn't last, perhaps, and that we do go back to this state that Hunt was alluding to, that the state where we don't live like death is on our left shoulder every single day, but we go back to the banality of whatever it is. So could you say something about that? Where you are you still there? Can you maintain it? Is it maintainable? You, Hunt, Teresa?
I'm trying. I mean, I haven't gone back to work yet, but you know, I intend, just like it takes work, just like Hunt said, you know, you can work really hard, and if it's important to me or important to us to maintain that, then I'm going to make it happen. I have to remember the experience and filter information maybe differently, continue to read and make myself better, being open to the fact that I don't know everything and that I can have a blind spot, that there's ways to improve yourself. I think just that in and unto itself is good prognostically. So I'm going to try for sure.
Buddy, could you restate your question? I'm not sure.
So my question is, you've achieved almost, because of this, for a period of time, a state that I would venture to call a state of grace, where you have heightened level of enlightenment, insight, perhaps, whatever it is, a certain state, I think you alluded to earlier. And where you just said it, you know, your 35-year-old, tell him, enjoy the moment, live your life fully, don't squander whatever it is, something along those lines. That's my interpretation. Is it a sustainable state, this level of intensity? And if not, is there things that can be done to go back there every now and then to be able to draw from this incredible awareness and energy?
Yeah, it's a insightful question, and without an exact answer. I think the idea is that the focus for the future, what sustains all of us, we have to have an eye toward what comes next. And these events change our lives. And a lot of my day is occupied with, to start with, there's that coffee, and then there's stretching for an hour and a half to deal with the spasticity and get better. Then there's the using stimulation techniques on the quads and hams on a stationary bike for 45 minutes a day. And that seems to help as well. So that just gets incorporated into the day. But the focus, I think, has to be maintained on what the things that are important in life to each individual. And how can I move forward and accomplish those things? And they're going to be harder to accomplish in the new world than they would have been before. But they're still doable. And it may be a different way of getting around. It may be the travel is a little more awkward and takes a little more planning than before, but that's all right. And if you're golfing, you may be using a golf cart rather than walking 18 holes, and that's all right too. So I think it's a continuum that changes in texture as time passes after an injury, and as recovery occurs, whether it's incomplete or total. And in our arena, it's almost always partial or incomplete, I should say. And you can build a life around that with a continued pursuit of getting better and able to better compensate, whether that's by building strength. I'm 40 pounds down from where I was the night of injury. And I'm trying to focus my work every day is to build, core strength, because that helps me with my gait and helps me be able to deal with terrain and staircases and so forth. All those things. It just that you have to create those mechanisms within your normal day that allow you to stay on target with your goals.
Hunt, there's a bit of an insightful question from our colleague Nilesh Vyas. He's asking, both of you actually, but I'll pose it to you. Is it uncomfortable to talk about these things in your daily life? Do you direct others to avoid talking about it in regular days outside of this session today, for example?
No.
Okay. Yeah.
I should get some award for the shortest answer of the night.
You've got the award in any case. I can go down the questions, but anybody wants to chime in with something? Go ahead, Teresa. You're muted.
Sorry. I think this is a question that really doesn't have a fixed answer. But one thing might be an explanation. So the best things that we have the best things that maintain our life, like breathing, like our heart beating, they are background noise for our brain. So we don't constantly think about them. They happen. And the moment that we have to think about them, also for movement, means that they are not working as nature made them work. So I think the process of having to think constantly and being grateful about what happened and saying actively, I have to squeeze my day and to be grateful for this day and for moving and for breathing and for everything. I think this will fade with time, and but this is good. This means that it's the natural process taking in, and this can be taken as a positive sign. The moment that we have 1, 2, 3 days without thinking about it, it means that it's part of our life. It's part of our balance, of our new balance. So I like to think about, I don't know if this is the correct answer, because there's no correct answer, but at least this allows us to go with an answer that will be positive for our lives. So the moment we forget it, it's not wrong.
Yeah, the thing I would say, Jacques, I think it's super important for us to show vulnerability. That basically, because everyone's vulnerable, we don't admit it, and then this carries on, whether it's in our, and that's why I think our specialty, whether as neurosurgeons or as just physicians in whole, I think it's important that we show vulnerability, period. I think it makes us more human. It makes us more open to someone being confiding in us. And if I show vulnerability to you, you're more likely to show vulnerability to me. Our relationship improves. And then everything, it's like a flywheel with that, with the way you create a culture and you develop true friendships, true relationships that are not superficial and based on something that's real and important. And I think that, I think I would agree with Hunt, zero, no. I'm talking about this stuff.
Joe, I think everyone on this call is in a very privileged state. Our because of our life experience, our learning, our training, our experience caring for sick people over decades and or centuries in my case, they add to your bank account, as Fadi was saying. We have a very, very full bank account. And a real challenge comes in caring for some of our patients who don't have a full bank account, and how to maybe mentor them and help them explore, perhaps through reading, as you alluded to, Teresa, and other ways of expanding their universe, even after an injury that does limit some of their capabilities. I think that's a way to challenge them and help them, where each of us is going to be perhaps more adept at managing loss because of our bank account, and how to help them develop that bank account even after a setback. I think it's a real challenge, but something that we can do, and I think all of us do, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. And quite honestly, one of the things that's helped me the most through my life, through my career, in dealing with people with desperate conditions, is humor. And it provides a connectivity with that poor soul that you're trying to help. They don't expect perfection from us. They expect that we are human beings and that we will give it all we've got. They know that perfection is not a rational goal always. And I think if we sit at the bedside, sit on their bed, hold their hand, and communicate in the ways that David was alluding to, not by standing with a mask and standing with gloves and standing away from a patient that you're trying to talk to. I sit on their bed and hold their hand in pre-op. And what I really enjoy doing is they're coming in for a really difficult, challenging, and dangerous operation. And I give myself a tremor and I say, "Hi, I'm Dr. Batjer. I'm your surgeon this morning." And honestly, they absolutely love that. The surgeon with the shakes, they think that is hilarious, and it puts them in a better place. So I just offer that as a suggestion.
Alan, may I call on Alan? Alan, I'm delighted to see Dalton Dietrich listening in. He posed the question. Would you mind maybe taking that question and make your own remarks about this? I think that's up your alley.
So Dalton's question is, in terms of a cure for paralysis, what areas should we focus on to improve function in our patient population? I mean, I think that's a great.
Found this on the web.
I think that's a great question. I think that you know, we're focused here today on central cord injury, but I mean, the lessons that we're learning today are so impactful for any type of disease process that we'll all eventually encounter, whether it's a stroke or cancer or some neurodegenerative disease. I really thank the people on this panel for imparting their experience, and I probably learned more today than I have in any neurosurgical lecture that I've heard in the last 25 years. So again, thank you to the panelists, but to Dr. Marcos for putting it together. With regards to you know, what are the most important parts to fix after spinal cord injury? I'd love to hear from the panelists. There's certainly that question has been asked to people with paralysis before, and it's not the answer you would think. You know, most people would think that if they've had a spinal cord injury, the most important thing to recover would be walking, but that isn't necessarily the case. Hand function and bowel and bladder function and sexual function are some of the top priorities of our patients with spinal cord injuries. And so central cord injury is one of those everly increasing types of injuries we see. We've kind of solved spinal cord injury from a motor vehicle accident point of view with airbags. People know not to dive into water as much anymore. So as our population gets older and continues to be extremely active, that is the most common spinal cord injury we see, which affects hand function. And I know that's an incredibly important part of this injury and the recovery process. So I leave it to Hunt and David to talk about that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bernard.
No, I may have read your mind, but we may have the same question. You know, part of what I worry about for some of my patients, one thing I've been looking at more lately than I used to, is what's their social network. You see some patients, poor patients in the hospital are alone, and some who have a whole tribe behind them. And I wonder for Hunt and David and Teresa, what was the role and impact on your social network, whether it be family, friends, wife, sister, et cetera? And what role did they play in your recovery? Because some people are not as lucky maybe to have, you know, a strong social network.
And can I build on your question? If they're comfortable or they're interested, I think if Jan next to Hunt and if Nancy next to David want to chime in, you know, feel free. If not, whatever you guys decide. The role of your family in your recovery and how
I'm happy to take a toss at that, David, unless you want to go first.
Go ahead, Hunt. I'll defer to seniority.
I just look old. I'm not really. Yeah.
You look great, by the way.
It's been absolutely huge. I'll just give you a couple of simple examples. Family and friends. I talked about Dr. Hadley. Ralph Dacey, a very dear friend of decades in duration, one of the finest people in our field, has sustained a neurological complication, as you know. And I've talked to Ralph very, very frequently, including in the hospital. And his wisdom, his humility, insight is so incredibly valuable and supportive and graciously given of his time. I'll never forget it. My daughter, Hannah, my oldest daughter, when I came home, I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't brush my teeth. I couldn't bathe. And she did everything. It was unbelievable. It was during COVID. And I remember crying the first time that she saw me do buttons. But those things, that support network is critically important. I can't overemphasize.
David? Yeah, I mean,
Are we going to get you emotional now?
No,
if we
no.
talk
I
about it?
want to answer it the correct way. I mean, look, I have a wonderful marriage, and it's, if anything, my wife's had her medical issues, and when it was me, it was kind of roles reversed, and I think that we were there together, and she was with me. That was sacrosanct, and we have a new trust, and we were in a good spot, and so it's hard to see how that could get much better. But I developed an incredibly close relationship with my brother. It was building before then, and then he was there for me. He flew to Denver and helped Nan when I wasn't there, because there wasn't any help. And so I think these family relationships are, you have lots of circles. That core, you can't expect the same amount of effort from, your best friend as your brother or your wife or your son, for that matter. My son, what he went through, he was studying for exams and was in my hospital room every day. And it is hard when the person you look up to suffers this way or is weakened. But what I would argue, and what I will always do now, is a simple phone call or a text or a visit means so much to us. And when you're struck down and you're compromised, it's when your friends care about you, it means so much. It really does. And I promise myself now that I'll make that extra effort when someone else has a problem, because I want to be able to be there for people and want them to feel supported and loved. And I think that it helps so much when you're struggling, and when you're alone a lot in life, and you're even more alone when you're struggling physically. And I think that during those dark times, that phone call or text or whatever were so valuable. And I think just remember that down the road when you have friends or family that are injured.
I'm sorry, I disconnected for a second. I'm just pulling the questions again. A very good question from Shamaila, who I assume is a nurse. She's asking you both, do you have feedback for nurses taking care of patients with spinal cord injury? So she'd like your point of view, having gone through this.
I would say it's incredibly important, as David alluded to. It's really the physicians come and go, right? They make rounds, they move on to the next room. It's the nurses that come in to deploy the orders and create understanding with the patient about what the plan is and why. But also, maybe I was just blessed by wonderful people, but they were so attentive and compassionate and respectful, not just to me. And I watched them with other people as well. They were completely respectful to their patients, and perhaps that's part of how you added that bank account. By those simple gestures of humanity and love and affection.
We can keep going on forever here. How about we keep it for 10 more minutes? And I'm going to open it up for anything. Hunt and David.
I just want to say, nurses, thank you. The grace, it's just grace, and it humbled me tremendously. And I almost want to say I'm sorry or something, but I just can't say enough about what nurses do, and they do it willingly and without someone thanking them. And they're now, especially with the EMR and what they're forced to do and take them away from us, it's overwhelming. And I just want to say thank you, and hopefully I'll be better for it.
David, what does the near future hold for you?
I'm good. I'm good. I tend to go back to work in April. I really have all my motor function. I'm just, I have some dysesthetic stuff in my shoulders and forearms that's managed with medication, but my hands are good. I'm not going to rush back. I'm not going to lie to you. I want to make sure that I feel confident and comfortable. Hunt was in a little bit different time in his career. He's a little older than me. And so, his challenges are a little bit different than mine. I'd like to be.
Thank you for continuing to rub that in, David.
I'd like to be able to continue to operate. He was, like you said, he was beginning to think about retirement. This was a little bit further away from me, and I'm in my third trimester, but maybe early third trimester. But I look forward to going back, and I don't want to go back the same. It's not my intent. I want to be better up here and make good decisions and continue to help to grow our program, both with my hands and with my head. And I think I'll be able to do that. I think we're designed that way at our Athleticism. And I think I got to thank all the people there. Our administrator, Rebecca Wallach's incredible. And the way they've handled themselves in my absence has been, just really gratifying to see how things have worked out. I'm sure Hunt feels some of that too. You almost feel like you died and there's still people around you that you see what it would be like. It's just, and I consider myself very, very lucky.
Bernard, Fadi, any last minute or comments?
Mainly,
I think Hunt was going to say. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, please. Hunt, you were going to say something?
No, I was listening. Sorry.
No, I'm just grateful, that David and Hunt and Teresa, came forward and were willing to share their time. And it's just, this may be selfish to say, the initial feeling when you're both injured was one of, again, as I said earlier, as if an uncle or brother or father had an injury. So it has that same intensity of feeling. But there's also a sense of gratitude now that you're doing well. But there's also maybe a selfish feeling of inspiration from you that, your story, I told Hunt the other day, I've never seen a rehab patient work as hard as Hunt. They're just, it's like what I'd imagine a Navy SEAL doing to train every day. And so when I'm hesitant to get on my exercise bike or go for a workout, what's my excuse? And so it's really, you both have been, and I'm sorry I don't know Teresa as well, but Hunt, thank you for the inspiration that you've given us. That may sound selfish, but thank you for all you've done to let me put it one other way. Sorry, one final thought is, I think when I talked to Hunt soon after his injury, we were having a discussion. I don't know if you remember this. And I told you, I tried to hint at you what your fight would mean to others. And I don't know if you remember that. And the battle you both are going through, have gone through, does carry meaning to your children, to your family, and to your mentees. I've been called by a lot of your prior residents and colleagues who are inspired by your story. And that maybe that probably not the highest on the list of that bank account of what motivates you, but it certainly does have value to those around you, and, your social network and your academic network, et cetera.
Well, I appreciate that, Bernard, and I very much do remember that discussion. And it follows along many things that Ralph Dacey has communicated to me. And I've got with current technology, I've got a video library of the progress over time that is totally incredible to look at. And I'm trying to think of what best to do with it. What would be impactful with it? It is admittedly very painful to look back at. But what would be the way to frame it, to make it not inspiring but useful to not only people in our field, other medical personnel, but also patients in general.
I think you could make a great documentary. I think David Langer knows some people who could think about that.
Right.
Yeah. I'd probably give it to Katie or Rico, and I know she turned it into something great.
By the way, one thing I'll add, I'm sorry to be talk on here, but it's not just your mentees, but there's just a concept that now the mentees of your mentees. So when you would send me Hunt would send me text messages of his videos, and just through, because we always bring up, Hunt Batjer stories, or I learned this from Hunt. And so a lot of people around me who've never met you are kind of also influenced by you. So there's sort of this logarithmic growth of mentorship. And they were following your videos and saying, oh, that looks better, and and inspired by you. So it's not just restricted to those several dozen or several hundred mentees, but every one of those mentees may have another dozen or several hundred mentees. So it's that logarithmic impact of mentorship. And and same for David with his both academic and a Hollywood followership.
Fadi, your last words? And then after that, we'll do Teresa and then Alan. Are you speechless? Do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I am speechless. This has been emotionally intense, I think, for probably for Hunt and David more than the rest of us. But what's going through my mind, I know Hunt and I know Dave a lot more, but these are two amazing individuals who are loved and appreciated by a lot of people. And I want to say that I'm very happy that you pulled through it. And because you have a lot to offer, you've offered a lot, and you still have a lot to offer. And it's our luck and the luck of those who know you and love you that you're doing there, and you've given us a lot of lessons tonight. I got to take home. The thing that life is, it's one foot in front of the other. The marathon metaphor, the money in the bank metaphor. So thank you for making it through this.
I want to say that when I got hurt, my wife called my brother and then called Fatty, and that's the impact that you've had on me, and I can't, that'll never go away now for sure. Not that it would have, but when I missed your meeting, it was how much I look forward to that, but yet I felt like you were there, and I always appreciate all you've done for me. You too, Jacques.
Thank you, buddy. Teresa, your final words, if any.
My final words. I think I remember in the first PowerPoint presentation that you said you asked that one of our tasks as psychologists here would be to answer the question of candles or fires.
Yeah. What do you think? There are clearly two fires, no candles here.
I think Hunt is a candle that is completely still on fire, and it's a mix in between being fire and being a candle at a moment.
Okay.
And I think, David, you are a fire with fear of becoming a candle.
I like that.
This was my final words. So, of course, in a very, very short analysis that we had here and without any kind of scientific or professional basis. Okay, this was just an informal way of finishing it.
Alan.
No, it's hard to follow those comments, but incredible stories and incredible neurosurgeons, and I learned more than I can ever let you know, and I thank you for sharing your stories. And I'd love to hear the 2-year follow-up of where you are in the recovery process. Jacques, of course, only you could pull this off. Congrats.
Well, I have good friends. It's very easy when you're friends with those people and you care for them. And that's how I will end the session, really. Thank you just doesn't summarize it enough. Somebody was asking, of course, this session is recorded. Anybody in the audience interested in the link where to watch it or give it to friends to watch it later, go in. I just put it in the chat box, copy that link. Obviously, it won't be there now. It'll take a few days probably. Hunt, David, it's going to sound cliche, but I can't come up with anything else. You are indeed an inspiration to many. And I mean, I don't have time to read the various lovely notes of people inspired. Somebody said spellbinding. I mean, this session was a fantastic contribution of you to not just neurosurgical community. I mean, nurses, I mean, just listening to your ability to put your thoughts and your pain, your inner pain and your struggles. I mean, it's been tremendous, and maybe just one further step perhaps in helping you realize how many people love you and how that can perhaps translate in even a faster recovery for both of you with this mind-body interaction. And I'll leave it at that. Big hugs to everybody. Big thanks to everybody who spent 2.5 hours with us today, and see you everybody soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jacques. Thanks, Fadi. Thanks, Bernard.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you to all the speakers. This session is over. Have a good night. Bye-bye.